I thought we'd maybe review, if I can get my camera set right. If you can see the board, okay? Everybody can see it?
Yeah, Friday night.
That's good?
Yes.
Okay. No particular study, but more so just because we always like to get together and discuss the departmenters' presentations. And I thought maybe we could do that now if everybody would like that. I put down the topics that I grabbed, and maybe there are others that somebody else has that they would want to add to this as well. But thought I'd start with the shaking. Who can give us a little summary of the discussion on the shaking? You can do the H in the chat or go ahead and speak.
Well, let's see. Somebody put their hand up before I start speaking. Who was that?
Christine, let me
That's
ask,
okay.
Go
No,
ahead,
go ahead.
Christine. Go ahead, Christine.
Can I ask real quick? Hold on. Kathy says that the sound is real low. Is it low for everybody?
Yeah,
I can hear you okay.
Okay.
it's okay for me.
Oh, that's because my thing is low.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, go ahead,
that's-
Christine.
sorry.
Let me know if you can hear some humming and their neighbors are doing work. Anyway, I thought the major thing that he pointed out overall with all the shakings was there was power struggle over money, and doctrine, those three things. So power, money, and doctrine. And Fel was probably going to say the same thing. What were you going to say, Fel?
No, that's good. What I was going to say is that all the other shakings was obvious. But this particular shaking that we're having now is not so obvious.
Why is it not so obvious?
Well, because it's
because people are staying in the movement.
I was also thinking, but I don't know if using the term internal would be correct. But it is an internal work going on within each individual, whether they're, even if they're in body, physically, externally, internally, they might not be in agreement, which is the opposite of all the other shakings that we saw. They were external and obvious. These are more internal and subtle.
I'll add to what Susan said. You gave the title, The Enemy Within the Gates, within the gate, which is within the movement, the people. And the text that he used, I didn't get the actual text. It's he said King James. The purpose of those who know to do good, but they don't do it. It's sin. And that was the theme of this first study. And it's a shaking, but it's not seen. And I have one more thought to this. Not being seen, isn't it the fruit, the seeds that are planted? Remember in our Matthew 13 study? We're observing, but there's there's no plucking out the tares. That's not our work.
Yeah, depending on how far we go with this, I want to go back to that word observing
Yes.
after we get through this discussion. I'm not gonna have
Okay,
time to
good.
write everything, but I thought I'd at least write that and we'll write what we can.
Okay, that sounds good.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm sorry, am I supposed to put the H down?
No, it's fine.
Okay. He referenced, he said the enemies were those that thought that the message at the formalization would change. And he said, you enemies, because the message doesn't change. It doesn't change. And if it did change, what would happen then? And then he said, a crisis and a shaking, because the message never changes. It can't change at that later stage, like it just can't change. That was the argument that him and Aaron was having. So, and the enemies, he called you enemies who think that the message changes. It never changes. And if it did change, there would be chaos. There would be a shaking and a crisis. And I think he's implying that that's the reason why we have a crisis and a shaking, because there are some people here, he called enemies, that are thinking that the message changes, and it never does. That's what I got.
And Troy said, especially men don't want to be seen as sexist. They don't agree, but protecting their image, they won't leave. Yeah, and going back to what Donna said, I know I have to review. I've been reviewing them, but I need to go back and hear that discussion again to just for my own self, because I was thinking as she was talking about that, I'm going to just consider this the priest line, just a little drawing of the priest line, and we have the little way marks, right? And I don't know how to.
Yeah, he said that there was a beginning and an end to those little fractals that you have right there, right? There's the beginning, and of course, they did. He wanted to say beginning and end, but everybody was saying, well, no, you can't say end because it isn't the end. But what I think he was trying to get at is that we want to think of it as the beginning and the end, so that we would be solid in that message. Because if we think it's not the end, then we may have a tendency to believe that possibly the message could change. And that's why he was trying to say it's the end. Let's think of it as the end, because if we think of it as the end, that formalization, that message that was given to us, the midnight cry, whatever that message is for that dispensation, doesn't change. So we can't, even if it was the Sabbath, we can't change the message of the Sabbath. And, it never changes. It's solid. I think in his previous camp meetings, that was what he was trying to get at too, that Sabbath never changes. It never has, it never will. It is the message, what it is. And that's what he's trying to tell us, that the end, if we just look at it as the beginning and the end, instead of the unsealing and the increase of knowledge, and then the formalization, and then the test, if we see it that way, we may have a tendency to think that there's something more to come. There's a little bit more revelation that can happen within that one message. And I think he was trying to say there isn't. It's solid. It's done. It's sealed. That message is there and it isn't going to change. And to me, when he was calling somebody, the people who were the enemies, because he said you enemies, I think he was referring to people who thought that it might change. And that's that is what's causing the confusion and the chaos and the crisis and ultimately the shaking.
What about in some of these dispensations, the message, you know, this being time of the end, 1989 to 9/11, I'll write it there. And you've got 2014, 19, and 21, right? Have we ever been in a place where we walk into a new dispensation and growth and development has made us, doesn't change the message that happened here, but develop more change in us? I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Because we ended up with more information on that same, we were able to change more and come into alignment with that idea.
Settle into the truth.
Go ahead. Is that Bob?
Yeah, settle into the truth.
Yeah. Because we can be going along and keeping up with the light as it comes out, but the light that comes out, it doesn't change. Like the 2520 is still the 2520. It gives us the message of time, etc. But more light has made me look at myself of how wrong or wrongly I might have understood something. But anyways, I've seen it continue to grow and develop. I don't know that when we get here, is a loud cry just the culmination of all of it, if that makes sense. I think we still have to get there. And yes, have to settle into the truth. So thank you for all that input. Is there any other input on the shakings? No, he also had radical feminism, equality, and the Sabbath. Is that correct? Anybody remember that? I don't have those notes in front of me. Put there. Okay. So the enemy is within. The people are there. The people that are not leaving over power, money, and doctrine. It's not as obvious. There's not this big split because they do remain. And then I think it was Jackie that brought out that those to know to do good and don't do it, that is sin. We'll kind of get to that part down here about knowing God. Knowing God. Okay, so what about Ava, go ahead. You have a question.
Backtracking. Did he place close of probation? I don't have my notes on that point where it ends. Do you remember? Somebody remembers that?
Did he say what?
Did he put close of probation on that point where he insisted that it was end when he was talking with Aaron on the board? I believe there was a close of probation also.
He only pulled, if I remember right, only one dispensation. Is that correct? Anybody remember that? He was just like pulling one dispensation.
Yeah, I
Right.
think
When he labeled it, though, it was end. And I mean, he labeled close of probation and something else. And then he said end. Correct?
Anybody?
I don't remember the close of probation, honestly. I don't remember that.
Yeah, I have to look at my notes. But what I wanted to comment was that when he said end, it was not like the finality of it. I was looking at the other definition where there's like for that word end, it says the furthest or most extreme part or point of something. So I was thinking about that when he was saying end for that it was, pinpointing on that. I don't know how will we apply it, but I'm just thinking of that as meaning for that word and at that point.
I too don't remember him putting close probation, but rather the message that comes, there's a beginning where the message comes, and there's an end, you have a formalization and then an end. And you're tested on that message in that dispensation. But I don't remember him putting close probation at that end, because you would only go to here for that close of probation, if that made sense. Christine just posted the board. I can't quite see it without pulling up on the screen.
Right. So he just has beginning and end. I think at one point it might have said COP, if I remember correctly, but only because somebody put it there and then he erased it and wrote end. But I'm not sure if I'm remembering that correctly.
And what have we learned about things he writes on the board?
That it's not always correct, because he writes down whatever we say, but it doesn't mean that it's always correct. But I do remember him writing the end, beginning and end. So if you were to open it up, it would there's the, how it goes, Boston, Concord, Exeter, end, right? The Boston is the beginning and the end is the end. There's no close of probation on it.
Do you remember what was there? Boston, Concord, Exeter, what?
Yeah, because he doesn't have that part either. Remember, he was just talking about
What was put there though?
Well,
Boston, Concord, Exeter. What comes after Exeter?
Test.
For test.
Test.
But it looks like is it Sunday law?
he does have, yeah, he does have a Sunday law on one of them for the 2014, which
Yeah.
would also be for the end too. And she's Sunday law there too.
He put Sunday law.
You can put it up in share screen if you want. Will it
Me?
work? Do I need to remove spotlight?
I'll go ahead. No, I don't think you have to remove spotlight.
Oh, perfect.
How's that?
Yeah. You have my glasses.
So over here in this corner is where he has it. And we've got the 2001, that would be the Boston, and then you have Concord, Exeter, and then here he has the N for Sunday law in 2014, and then here beginning is like 2019, 2021, and here would be he wrote Sun. I think that Sun would be like Sunday law, right? I'm not sure what
Okay,
this
for
says.
2021, yeah. It looks like in that one, he was in that, if I remember right, he was looking at 9/11, the dispensation of 9/11 to Sunday law, because
Yeah.
2019
I think
and
that was
21.
Sunday law.
Yeah.
The two, and this says end. Does anybody know what this says?
Yes.
Test.
Time of
Test.
test. Okay, test.
Yeah, test.
Yes, now I see it. Okay.
Yeah. So he was taking this dispensation here, which these are like fractals of this, where you have the two little waymarks, and these are the two little waymarks. So you have the message that comes down, you have an increase of knowledge, formalization, and then you have a test. So beginning and an end.
Okay, we can't see you, Elaine. We see Christine's picture of the board.
So in the second one, because there's like two things for Zoom. You can pin hers, and then you can see them both. But you have to put them side by side. So let me stop sharing.
Yeah, I was trying to find the pin and I couldn't find pin the speaker for some reason.
Oh, I put it on spotlight. Can you see it now?
I see you, yes, but I don't.
Sure. Oh, you didn't see her board?
Oh,
I saw her board, but then I couldn't see you when you went back to
Oh, yeah,
talking.
yeah.
I could only see Christine. So.
Yeah. I just wanted her to put the board up for all of us to, if everybody was able to see it. Just so that the board got put up there and we could see what it said.
We can see it because she has the picture in the chat, so we can look at it.
Yeah. Okay, so we covered shaking. He also talked about Ellen White. And is she wrong? Was she wrong on things? How do we handle that?
not in her dispensation, but for us, you know, it's like any prophet, they know what's right for their time, but as we progress, the information becomes clearer, and so what they're saying isn't enough for us. It's not zoomed in for enough, you know. That's not what he said, but
he compared them, he called them bad teachers, and he said that God uses God's messengers, agents. He says God uses bad agents, bad messengers, bad teachers. And he said that Miller was a very bad teacher, and he represented Sardis. And then Ellen White, again, was bad, and she represented Laodicea. And those were the two churches, number 5 and number 7.
Why did he say she's Laodicea?
She, what did he give a reason why? What exactly? Oh,
Time.
oh, time, right? Because she was against time.
Yeah.
Time is the
That's
Lord.
what-
That's what made her really bad.
You know,
Going back to what Christine said, that she was right for her dispensation. Do you want to take that back? Where's Christine?
Christine said no,
She's not gonna take that back?
she's not taking it back. I'm just relaying the message.
Okay. Did she can't talk, I'm sorry.
Oh, she stepped away for a sec.
Oh, okay.
um for their dispensation, that's what they needed to know, right? I mean, because they couldn't go any further based on their ideas of slavery and women at that time, and God couldn't get them to progress any further at that time based on, you know, they only had, it wasn't a worldwide message yet, right? So they got as far as they could. So I can't take it back. But for us, it's not the right message. It doesn't go far enough.
Anybody
I mean,
else have thoughts on that?
I'd like to comment on that because it was very interesting because before the meetings, we met with an old friend and had lunch with her, and you know, we met her in the church when we first started going to the Adventist church, you know, and our children were babies. And now they're 29 and 30 somethings. But as we spoke with her, and she shared, you know, that her son was gay, and it didn't surprise us because we just felt all through his life anyways. So I think she felt, oh, you know, because we didn't get all worked up about it, we were like, yeah, you know, okay, yeah, and this and that. But we talked more, you know, so it was like common ground there. But then she started talking anti-Ellen White. So then it's like, then you come and hear Parminder say, you know, Ellen White, what'd you say? What's on the board behind you? Does it say she lied? Is that how he wrote it? That she lied? It's right behind you, Elaine. You're standing in.
I didn't write it. Oh,
Yeah.
question.
She was wrong. Yeah, because she's now, our friend is all into some guy's book. Have we heard of him? And it's kind of like every generation's got their person. Walter, well, anyway, in the early generation, David's parents,
The white line.
they wrote The White Lie. I can't think of the guy's name. It was David's pastor.
Yeah.
And can't think of his name, but he wrote The White Lie, which was all, and you know, all this stuff about how she lied and plagiarism and all this stuff. And now we've got in our generation some man who's written a book who has evidence, she says, you know, supporting the fact that Ellen White lied and this and such. And we just quickly like changed the subject because just because we, we're okay with Zach being, gay, doesn't mean we're anti Ellen White. And, but yet, and we walk into the meetings and then Parminder's saying, well, she was wrong. And I can't remember what example he gave.
Time.
Oh, time. Yeah, exactly. Hello. Yeah, that she was wrong on time. So my concern is, relating to people in regards to Ellen White, who think she was wrong, and we think she was wrong, but it's a very small, as far as I understand, area of her writings, and it had to do with doctrine and prophecy and that kind of thing, not the whole big general picture of Ellen White. Do you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, we said nothing to her about this person or this book, but she's going off on that direction, which it doesn't surprise me, just because it's a long story. But anyway, so that's my concern, is how to deal with individuals like her who we encounter, old friends, that might say, go on down that path, that she's wrong, and we are in agreement, and only to, an nth degree. I mean, I don't know what more he said she was wrong on. And so that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Can I please say something?
Oh. Yeah, or Christine first.
Go ahead, Christina. Christina can go, and I'll go.
My voice is
Oh,
not
it's Christina. Okay.
there. Yeah, I would like to say what I understand about time setting and Ellen White. After 1844, when Christ did not come, many people were trying to set times for Christ's coming. And that is why she talked against the time setting, because of that mistake. But in Adventism, we took that as being the present truth, which was not. So it was our misunderstanding of what she said. So she did have the truth for her own time, because they misunderstood the event of the October 22nd, 1844. And after that, people kept making, all kinds of time prediction of when Jesus is going to come. And she said, we are not doing time setting. That's what we're not doing anymore. So that's why she spoke against time setting.
Go ahead, Christine. Thank you, Christina.
I agree with Christina. And then, Elder Parminder not always, but I see him making dramatic statements like that to get our attention, but then we take them too far and misunderstand it. He quotes Ellen White all the time, and I know he respects Ellen White for what, how God used her as a prophet. And so when he says that she lied, I don't think she didn't know she was lying, right? She was taking the message according to what she understood at that time. And I don't think we should take it out of context and, wipe out what she was saying, because it was important for her time. Like Christina said, they were taking it too far in her time, and she was trying to correct them at that time. But we, since then, have taken her words out of context also, and saying that there should be no time, like in the SDA church, when in reality, God teaches his prophets what's coming.
First, that God chooses wrong agents, something along that line, because God doesn't look at our future. He did say God chooses bad agents. He also said, I don't remember if it was this camp meeting or prior to, but he has stated recently that our humanity gets in the way. And even applied that to prophets.
I might add to what you said, Elaine, because I wrote it down on that particular thought with God's agents. And I wrote, Satan doesn't know the future, just clever agents. God uses clever agents God uses are not very good. These are the ones, this was the words that I wrote down that Elder Parmenter said. God has a habit in choosing bad agents.
And that they are.
And then he went into the subject of the churches, 5 through 7. Donna mentioned that based on time.
Sardis and Laodicea, correct? Did I say that?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, he said
Sardis
that Sardis and
yeah.
Laodicea was here in body, but not in mind and spirit.
Mhm.
So who led the church into Laodicea?
Miller.
What was that?
I said Miller, but it could be
Ellen
wrong.
White.
Oh, White. Yeah, I don't. James White. Sarah says James White.
Yeah, because
What about James White?
Snow was the one corrected it. Snow corrected it. Didn't Snow correct it?
You're talking about Miller, not Ellen White.
Yeah, Miller.
Yeah, well, it was Snow who set a time instead of saying about.
Right.
So forget the word about and just set the time. But when we're talking about White, it was 1863 when, I don't know, besides James White, who else was all in the leadership? Or they're the ones who decided to chuck out the 2520 and make their own chart. And I don't remember Ellen White saying anything against it.
Well, Parmenter said she didn't say anything against it, but that she did support in her writings the first two charts. But he did say in the meetings that she was silent on the 1863 chart. And you're correct, was when James White, as you said, it checked out. I like that, checked out the 2520. And though we were in Laodicea before then in her writings, before 1863, I want to say, because I've always wanted the proof, I want to say it was like around 1853, she says it in her writings, but I have yet to have that proof in front of my face, showing the date that it was way back in the 50s that we were already Laodicea.
Ava had a comment. I forgot, Ava, I meant to go back to you. Are you there, Ava? If you are, you need to unmute. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was
There you
listening to
are.
chat.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the 1888 message. I believe that was the year when they rejected righteousness by faith. I'm just thinking of that right now as one of the downfalls for the church to go into a Laodicean stage, because remember that Ellen G. White was kicked out and she went to Australia. I don't know if they sent her or she decided to go there. But it was a very, very tough and depressing time for her when she was over there. Because now the way the church was going is like leadership was doing like, we're going to do our own thing. Like, we don't need the prophet to be telling us anything anymore. Like, we know how to handle ourselves. So I'm thinking that's when our Laodicean stage started, because
I have a comment too on that.
because people were probably just thinking all kinds of things about, what's going on, like, because even before she was kicked out, there was a lot of people that were very uncomfortable with her, because they constantly she would tell them their spiritual condition. In the testimony, there's a lot where, when the fact that she pinpointed so much defects in people, it was like a quote, she was like a prophet of doom. Honestly, that's how you can look at it, because, but the fact is that in one of her visions, she didn't want to do it. Like, she was so fed up. This is my interpretation. She was so fed up of telling people their wrongs. So she was like, you know what, I don't want to do it anymore. But she had a vision or a dream, I don't remember exactly, where she saw all these people coming towards her with raggedy looking clothes, and they rubbed their clothes onto her clothing, and it was blood. So here they coming towards her, and they're putting their blood onto her. But in that vision, I remember that Jesus's face was frowning upon her. And when she looked at Jesus's face frowning, that terrified her so much, because here she was, like, not wanting to obey God, because it was getting too much on, because people were getting on her now. But then when she saw Jesus's face, that's when she said, like, she got the courage now. You know what? I'm not gonna get, I'm not gonna deal with the people. I'm not gonna take people's attack against me. I'm just gonna worry about what Jesus thinks of me, because in at the end, that's what really matters. My salvation and my obedience to God. Well, anyhow, I was just kind of thinking of how after that period, I think it was kind of like Laodicea. To me, that's what it seems like it, but that's just my thought, throwing it there.
I think somebody else was saying something before I,
Yes, it was me,
okay.
Jackie. Eva, I'm glad for that information you shared, because it is the past history, and 1888 was the time of that message from Wagner and Jones. I studied that message very, very much, and it led, the rejection of that message put them into, they were already headed into Laodicea, but it put them into the rejection of that message. And there was a book written, I can't think of it now what it was, but the conference rejected that message because it was on the nature of Christ and what we know the true understanding of it, of that message given by Wagner and Jones, especially Wagner. And that rejection was mainly because the Adventist church wanted to be accepted by the Protestant world, because they don't know anything about the nature of Christ, the true nature of Christ. And they wanted to be accepted in that time. And it's escalated even more so now. They absolutely don't have any idea about the nature of Christ. It's a sin and repent, just like the Protestant churches. They don't have any victory because they don't understand the nature of Christ. And I really wanted to share that, because that is part of the history, and they never came out of that. Other rejections along the way, but yeah, And I'm in an agreement with Eva that it began Laodicean, but I think it was already on the way to that point. So that's all I wanted to say on the history.
Thank you. Regina, Phil?
Yeah, so going back to time, we know that the Laodicean condition began somewhere in the 1850s. And what Christina said, it began with people when Christ did not return in 1844. There were other sects, groups that try to set times without really any methodology. And Ellen White was basically telling them, stop it. Don't do that. Because there's no more time. And then somewhere, I know, well, 1850, they made another chart, but somewhere along then, they became Laodicean. And then 1863, the conference rejected, they just got the name Seventh-day Adventist. They rejected time. They rejected 2520, and I think I'm not sure if that's the only thing they rejected, but I know there was that 2520 was the major one. But I think there was others that they rejected. But Ellen White did not speak out against it. She was silent on that issue. She did not say that that was a no-no. Maybe she was not given a vision of what to say. I don't know, but we do know that she was silent for whatever reason. Maybe because she didn't want to go up against her husband. For whatever reason, she stayed silent. And then just from then on, it just became I guess worse in Laodicean condition. And as Jackie mentioned, in 88, with the rejection of Jones and Wagner, and basically rejected 1888. They basically, this is a leadership now, rejected Ellen White as a prophet. There's some things they accepted her as a prophetic saying, and there's some things that that they rejected. And then come 1919, as Jackie was saying, it was W.W. Prescott who wrote the book on Christology, rejecting prophecy, and from it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And then the other history is 1956 and 57, when Martin and Barnhouse met with the Adventists, and because we didn't want to be called a cult and wanted to become like the other Protestants, we just kind of rejected more messages, foundational messages. So I think it began in somewhere in 1850s, Laodicean. But I think we have to define. I think we have to define when Elder Parmenter said that, e.g., Ellen White was wrong. I think we have to define what that means. When he said, is she wrong?
Okay, let's go through a few questions. The 1850 chart, obviously 1850. What was on the chart? What was, back up real quick. What is 1850 on our line? We want to think about it in terms of the reform lines. What is 1850 on our line?
It's a Sunday law.
The law.
Sunday law, correct? It's here. And what happens at the Sunday law?
What happened? A test?
Yeah, I mean, what do we know from the great controversy? What's supposed to happen at the Sunday law?
Loud cry?
Loud cry to who?
To the world?
That's the way we understand it, understood, right? is that the message goes to the world. We know that the message goes to the church, then the message goes to the world, right?
Yes.
Okay. So 1850, I think we all agreed. I don't know if everybody did, but I heard it from a few, that 1850 is the Sunday law. So where's the message going to go? This is going to be the church, right? And then what?
And then message to the world.
Message to the world. So what do the 1850 chart have on it? What was it prepared for?
Prepare for the world?
Yes, prepared for the world. And what did it have on it? What was it? Main point.
It had the sanctuary and the Sabbath was, I'm trying to think because I don't have the charts up anymore, but in that corner, down in the left-hand corner was the sanctuary, the third angel's message, which I've always been told is the Sunday law.
What was missing?
Islam.
No, not Islam. The 1850 chart wasn't on the 1850 chart.
What is it? Did it have something to do with slavery? It didn't have that at all.
Slavery.
Yes, slavery, you're right.
So it did not have slavery.
That was a big boo-boo.
And who endorsed the chart?
Ellen White.
Right?
Yeah, that was a big boo-boo.
So in a message of time, if you have the beginning, you should have what?
The end.
You should have had the end. And how was the end calculated? Looking at our time, how was the end calculated? What was used?
520.
2520 is what calculated time. So in this, I think it's in this history here where it's Miller's gone, I believe, through here. I think he passed away back here a little bit before. So who is it? Somebody remember the name? I don't remember which one that comes out with the second 2520.
Hiram Edson.
Edson. What did Ellen White do?
I'm not sure what she did. I know he didn't. I know he never finished it.
Finishing it would have done what?
Show time. I mean, what
time?
The end.
So did she regret it? I mean, did she reject it?
She rejected it. She
did.
The way that Elder Parmenter put it, it's back in here in 48 that I think that's where he marked it, that she's saying no more time, no more time, no more time, no more time. Slavery's not on the chart. So is she a good actor and done a perfect work?
No.
Oh. No.
No.
Their dispensation, she was.
And what did he say about, he didn't list, he said something about he could list, a lot of other prophets. What did he say about a lot of previous past prophets?
That they're weak and erring and make mistakes.
That's a hard thing to swallow, isn't it?
When you really think about it, I don't think any of God's agents, prophets, teachers were ever perfect except Jesus. Every single one. I mean, Moses, John the Baptist, I can name them all. They all messed up. They all made mistakes except Jesus. He's the only one that was perfect.
So I want to go back to, yes, correct. I want to go back to 1850, I think I want to say. Let me think it through. So they have the Sabbath, right? In 1888, what are they arguing?
Righteousness by faith.
What's the leadership saying?
They rejected it.
Well, what are they standing for? What does the leadership stand for?
The law.
The law, go further.
Legalism.
Troy said Sabbath. Leadership says Sabbath. What does Wagner and Ellen White say?
That Sabbath was the Blair bill.
Yeah. And what is correct? So the leadership is saying the Sabbath is the message. The Sabbath is the third angel's message. What is Wagner and Ellen White saying?
Righteousness by faith is the third angel's message.
In verity.
So they have the Sabbath, and yes, the Blair bill, going back to, I said Wagner, I want Jones there, right? So what did Jones argue when he against the Blair bill? What was his argument? Which is equality. What was Jones's argument when he went?
Wasn't it about the Sabbath? Sunday,
his,
wasn't it about the Sunday, the blues, what do you call it? The Sunday law? Sunday, the blue, what's it called? The blue bills?
Blue law.
The blue laws, the Sunday,
yes, Christine said it was religious equality.
yeah.
That's what he was arguing for.
He wasn't arguing the Sabbath, was he?
No.
He was arguing equality, which is righteousness by faith, right?
Correct.
So you had, should have been two messages. I don't know if that's the right way to word that. So you come back here, and what do they have? Sabbath. What does slavery represent?
Equality.
Equality. So they're missing equality here, and they're missing equality here. But the Sabbath is there for both, right?
That's interesting.
Especially since you have people here arguing, are we supposed to keep the Sabbath anymore? Right? Or the question coming up about the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have Sabbath, and what else should you have?
Gender.
Equality.
Equality.
But specifically gender, yes.
And wasn't Jesus, by the way he treated women, encouraging equality also?
Yeah, he was. Yes, he was.
Yeah, he was trying to elevate them to where they belonged.
Yes.
And after that, women got to be baptized along with the men. They didn't.
Right. I mean, he didn't even condone the stoning of the prostitute, and yet they wanted to, follow the law, and he put it right in front of their faces,
So was that right, wrong?
That just brings a question. Ellen White, there was twice, I think there was twice in her lifetime. I can't remember exactly when. But I think there was twice when she expected Christ to return. So, wow, it's hard to think, but had she not made the mistake of no time and saw that there was an end, and not rejected the 25-20, not rejected higher medicine, he would have come.
Well, she's living in a dispensation of failure. It's an alpha dispensation. I'm not to say that, anything's predestined or anything, but I mean,
well, this opened up a whole other train of thought here. Yeah, it's the implication of this that Christ would have come, I mean, we know now and looking back, you know, because that was a failure, you know, there had to be another group of success, which we are. But had she not rejected time, because she was expecting Christ to return twice, but had she not rejected time and saw time and put time in its proper place and worked it out, it would have been success. I mean, we can look back in 2020, you know, hindsight 2020, and say they failed because she rejected time. But had she accepted time, Christ could have come, because they would have a better idea of beginning and the end. But because they had no foresight on the end, because time was rejected, Christ could not come.
So question on our little line here. We have the first angel, right? And in the message of time, what did the first angel do?
Rejected it.
Rejected it. Who worked out time?
Who worked, well, Elder Parmender, or the second angel.
So was it then the first angel, a prophet? I don't know if we call, do we call? All I know is Elder Parmenter distinguishes himself as different from the first and second.
Right.
That or first and third. So you have someone else comes along and works it out. So what about in this history here? You have someone else comes along and is going to work it out. But what did the prophet say?
Rejected it. Yeah, Higher Metzen worked it out, but she rejected it.
So if anybody remembers, he made a comment saying it's 1861, and the prophet says there's no time. But he would say, he would say, does he have the boldness and the courage to go and tell the prophet and show this out and work it out with the prophet? What did he do here?
You're pointing to the second angel?
Yes, you had the first angel that rejects time. The second angel is the one that presents time, works it all out, shows the evidence. The first one rejects it, right?
Yeah. The second angel corrects the first.
So is it
Is that right?
Is it possible that someone could correct Ellen White?
Yeah.
We think that a prophet cannot be corrected.
Yeah, that's a thinking.
So Elder Parmenter tried to correct Jeff Pippinger, Elder, and Jeff told him to leave the movement. Right?
Say that again, sorry.
So when Elder Parmenter tried to correct Elder Jeff, didn't Jeff tell Elder Parmenter to leave?
I don't know the exact details of what happened, but
Yeah, he said he was canceled out.
canceled.
Well, Tamina told us that he was disfellowshipped from the movement, however you can do that, but those were her words to us. He was disfellowshipped.
So what do we know?
And he was, sorry.
No, go ahead.
That is a revelation, because that's before I came in, that Elder Parmenter was there to correct the mistake of the first angel. And he was disfellowshipped. Or at least told he was disfellowship.
It's probably played somewhat of a role. I think Kathy probably knows better, but somewhat of a role why we never heard of him for quite a while.
Wow.
I have a
Yeah.
question. I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Remember, do you guys remember when he said, Elder Parmenter said he was not the messenger? What does he mean by that?
The way I understood or remember it, I don't think it's quite the way, I'm not sure what Troy's saying, but that there's a difference between the first and third and the second. There's a distinguishing factor between the first and the third, and that he is different from the first and the third.
Okay.
What I know that surprised me too when he said that, and what I was thinking when he said that is he is like us. He's a teacher, just like we ought to be teachers.
Yeah, that's down on our chart. I don't think we'll get there until next week. At some point. So how do we feel? What do we think about working through this way now?
Elaine?
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
The thoughts that keep popping into my mind here is as Elder Parmenter is talking to us about the deceptive danger of this individualism, and that we have to be part of the group. And as others have already stated today, that being part of the group, each one of us have maybe slightly different perspective, and you put it together and you've got the answer. The whole is there, and we can all learn to resonate with one another on it. And if I look back at the Millerite, early Millerite period of time, we know that William Miller only saw one half of the 2520. And then even though Hiram Edson saw that, Hiram Edson was actually rejecting William Miller's side of the 2520, and he was only seeing the other side of the 2520. They weren't ever coming together on it. And so to me, that actually epitomizes how there's elements of truth there that need to come together. And then the fact that it was a dispensation, as we know, of failure, but then we know that Ellen White may have said, and we know she said, there's no more time. And it's already been clarified the reason why she was saying that there was no more time, because there was a whole bunch of people trying to come up with all kinds of goofy ways of time setting. And when she said that, then it reminds me of something else Elder Parmenter said at the camp meeting. He said, you can't hang on every word that he says, or that Elder Tess says, because of the fact that they're human beings that can make mistakes, or they could make statements that were only meant to be applied to one thing, and we take that statement and twist it into something else, and those are just my thoughts.
Yes, I do remember that, Bob. He was trying to explain to them, like when somebody would say, well, remember when you said this? And he went, oh, I did? Oh, and I think somebody said, oh, yeah, you said that, this date meant something. And he was like, oh, I did? Oh, well, I guess if I said it, that must be true then, because I don't remember it. So he was trying to reiterate that you're right, exactly what you said. Don't take every word they say. So how are we to, so let's dissect that for a moment here. We know Ellen White and all the prophets before her, and everybody was wrong in some sense, because we're all human. And our teachers today, they're all human. So don't take every single dot and tittle that they say as law. So then what then?
I want to make one comment quick to Troy, what Troy said so I don't miss it. Because while he worked out time, Troy brought up, he worked out that this was the Sunday law. So what happened in 2014 at that time? Was there a Sunday law?
No, not a literal Sunday law, but you bring me to something. This has me think so much, and I don't want to be like way out in left field, but sometimes I feel like I am anyway. So when he initially began the presentation on the shakings, and Kathy remembered so many of them because Kathy and David have been there the whole way through. When he got to the 2014, before he expanded on all the knowledge that we're now discussing, he listed the shaking, and the shaking was over Islam, over that scripture in Joel, and the 4 insects, and whether it was Islam or Rome, Babylon. And right then and there, I was thinking that he was trying to get us to see part of the Sunday law for us coming because of that split on that issue. And I was thinking about what was happening over Israel and Palestine in regards to that particular shaking. And anyway, I'm having a hard time explaining, but each test that we had the shaking, like the Godhead issue, I think it was the Godhead issue, right? Which would be the nature of humanity, which would be the righteousness of Christ that they had to accept. And each shaking shows a form, something that we had to accept in order for us to be able to gain the whole knowledge that we need to prepare us for the test. But anyway, maybe I just talked too long. I don't know.
I don't know. Before we're finished.
I have a
ahead.
question. Yeah, well, first of all, Susan, I just want to keep encouraging you to be far left because you have the bravery, the courage to ask those questions, which are great questions, and eventually we'll come to the center. So keep asking those far left questions. The other point is that you asked about the Sunday law, about the 2014. Was that a Sunday law? And I say yes. Somebody said for the priests, but at that point, it wasn't obvious. It wasn't seen. It was only as we developed, it was seen as a Sunday law, but I don't think initially it was believed as a Sunday law. It was believed as Sunday law just by the methodology that was pointing that to be the Sunday law, but it wasn't obvious. So, so if 2014 being a Sunday law but wasn't obvious, this shaking that's going on right now, it's not so obvious, only to Elder Parminder, but it's not obvious until they pointed it out. I'm thinking that our test is not going to be so obvious.
Definitely.
That we really have to be diligent and mindful and studying, because we did say before that it was not just this one glaring neon light law that says, oh yeah, that's it. It's not going to be like that. So with all these subtleties that are going on, I have a suspicion that our Sunday law test is harder than we think it is.
And you brought up what I was gonna say as well next here that, Troy mentioned. We said, yes, it was a Sunday law, but it wasn't, I don't know if that's the question that I asked. Trying to remember how I asked the question. Because we know that the math was worked out to predict 2014 as a Sunday law, but say you're the person that predicts the Sunday law and 2014 comes, you're out on a limb. And it doesn't happen the way you think it's going to happen. So I'm going to go to Ava because I don't want to miss her on here. And then Jackie. Ava, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to also encourage Susan. And before I forget what Phil was saying, what brought me back to the Adventist Church, where we were constantly learning about being prepared for the Sunday law. And I know that there's quotes, I don't know right now, top of my head, where she talks about our readiness is not in looking at the events so much of what's, like we're waiting for it. As soon as I see the event, I'm just going to just get ready. I'm going to get myself together with God and start praying and start fasting, doing all this work at the last minute. Like, it doesn't work that way. And I thought, wow, what Fel just said just gave me what Christine had talked about during the camp meeting, where she was questioning herself, which I also agree with her, because I think this is really pinpointing at ourselves. And that's the most difficult, the most horrendous task we want to see. We don't want to see our true selves because it is not pleasurable. Actually, it's painful. And I think God is pinpointing the way that I'm looking at it. He's pinpointing me individually, what is wrong with me. Because intellectually, mindfully, I'm learning all this, and I know, yet my heart has to be with Jesus. I think it's more than my heart has to be with Jesus. It's the opposite. Jesus has to be in my heart. And I think that has to be my mission, more than saying I want to be in Jesus's heart. We all know we're all in Jesus's heart. The question is he in our heart? That's my sharing.
Thank you. Jackie?
Yes, thank you, Eva. What Phil said got me thinking, because it's not going to be an obvious event. And I went to last day events on the shaking. And I want to read this later this afternoon. And it's those in the church now that are being shaken. The shaking's going on, but it's individual. And it's not obvious. If it's not obvious, we shouldn't be looking at others anyway, but it's our own experience. We have to stand on our own 2 feet and what our responsibility is. And this is where my question is, how is this looking now? And I believe that in last day events, just before or just after the shaking is the loud cry. I want to understand that more clearly, because, of course, I want to make sure that my own life is right with God, and I'm doing my part as God would have me be doing it. And because the next event to happen before the Sunday law, because it would have to come first. That shaking going on within now, people aren't leaving the church or the movement. So it moves us into that obvious thinking, maybe, that what Phil brought up about it's not going to be an event, maybe, in the Sunday law, that it's even obvious. So I'm not looking for any certain event, traumatic. All of a sudden, we've got government putting persecution on God's people, as the old thinking would go, because of the day we worship on. I'm thinking more in terms of being prepared for what God is calling and what we know as the latter rain. So I'll just stop right there because I don't want to project anymore other than the fact that we're right before that event to happen.
Can I
And
say
there's more to
something?
come.
Hold on, Francisco has his hand up and then Christina. That was Christina,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Francisco has his hand up and then Christina.
Go ahead, Christina, because you're losing your voice. So I want to hear what you have to say.
My voice is lost, whatever. Go ahead.
My thoughts are, I think Bob touched on it, and Elder Parmenter and Elder Tess allude to it. And I think even Jesus testified to it, that this is a group effort. And God is marrying the church. He's not marrying individuals who can figure everything out. He's marrying the church. And I think collectively we can solve the problems of the prophecy that are before us. And because we sit around and hash them out, we talk over the lines and dates and who said what and what was written in scriptures and all that. And I think that's an important thing, I really do. Because when Jesus showed up on the scene, the first thing he did, he collected his little group, his little church, the beginning of the church, a really small number, and I think that's what he's doing with us. We're a really small number, and he's putting his hope and his blessings into that, like he did with the apostles. So I think collectively we have the capability of solving some of the tough questions. We really do, when we have a fail that throws us into use your slow brain, and then you have Susan who throws in little bits and pieces from places that we didn't think to think of in the first place. She throws it out there and she throws that in the mix. Then Christine throws in there, well, this is what the scripture says, and this is what Elder Parmenter says. And everybody puts their little bits into the stew, and we all stir it up, and we all have our, we all have our contributions, and it comes out to a pretty good stew from what I can see. That's what I see.
That is well said. I think you got it.
Now, Christina, thank you.
So I would like to say something about the shaking. and the individuals that are still in the movement and not leaving. The way I understand and the way I see it. I've been in the movement since 2014 when the shaking was going on with Mark Bruce. A shaking takes time. I did not go with Mark Bruce because I did not like his anger and I did not like his patriarchal approach to the things. This is God's movement, and God is shaking out those people that do not accept equality. Another shaking happened in 2019. I was here. I saw very well what happened. So people have questions in their mind for a while. God gives them time. God sends the message to be informed. And when the final day, when the groups separate, that's when they choose which side to go. Actually, they choose before, step by step, but we are not at the final of our shaking. We're still working through it. That's why people are not leaving. When the final day of the shaking is going to be, then will be two groups separating. This is how I see it.
And just to Troy, no, you were adding to this too and giving us all things to think about and what they said about Susan. There's nobody be afraid. I'm probably one of the biggest ones to be afraid to speak, and that's bad on me. But to be bold enough to say, and then we can throw it out there and work through it. So no, don't be worried about that at all.
Amen.
Yeah.
And this is
throw it
the
out for
final
free.
subject of the shaking is Sabbath equality. This is the final subject.
So what time do we have here? We basically covered these 2 points here. And I think this is going to be a big one to go into. Long discussion. I wanted to reference I gotta be right back because I want to get the video that I was watching so that it goes along the lines of what several of you are talking about. Susan speaking up and all that, but let me just go grab my Kindle because it's on my Kindle real quick. I don't remember the title.
I have a question. I don't think it has much, what's the word, effect on us, but we heard in 2019, sitting in church, a representative of the Sister White estate in England, which I'd never even known there was anything, and I think Anna was there, she can verify to it that the Adventist church had shut down the books of Sister White, was going with the Bible only. Everybody was kind of shocked and didn't know which way to look or what to say. I'm trying to figure out what is the relativity of that? Does it have any effect on anything? I don't think it does on us. Maybe on the church, I don't know. Just like they did back then, they shut her down and sent her to Australia. Well, they shut her books down now in the Adventist church. We heard them do it.
We still quote Ellen White and believe in what she says. I mean, for her time, and we're not going to just throw our books out.
I think that's just another witness to which direction they're going.
Yeah.
It just shows their character.
That's what we kind of figured out, Francisco. There they go, heading down to the other side.
I had in my notes on that what Elder Parmenter's comment was when it comes to Ellen White, that it's we have to be careful, and I don't remember how he worded it, in dismantling what she said. Because we can see here that it was her rejection of time and endorsing the 1850 chart that didn't even have slavery on it that took the church into Laodicea. And then he, stated Miller was bad, and he stated a couple other prophets, I believe. I can't remember which names, but then he said he could list a whole lot of others that all had problems. And he's also stated that the prophets all are subject to the same to humanity, just like any one of us are. And there's a reason he wants us to understand that. But I put in there the title. I didn't put the link. If anybody wants to put the link in there. Many are called, but few are found worthy. It was December 31. I wrote 21, but it's 31. That might help with this. And I know that we talked about that presentation when it went on. And but we shouldn't be afraid, and there's encouragement there to not be afraid to look into these things, because many of these, if you think about Noah's Ark, many people came along the way and did work on Noah's Ark, right?
Yeah.
And Noah's Ark.
Yes.
Yes.
And Noah's Ark represents a reform line. And so a lot of people come along the way, and we tend to want to discard the ones that went by the wayside and lift up, maybe lift up others. When it's collective, I think somebody used that word, the collectiveness of working together.
Right.
So I was thinking, as we go forward, Christine and I are working on the scheduling for going forward with the new schedule changes in the letter that went out. We're going to work on Sabbath, and then there's a couple others we'll talk about later that are going to work on the Wednesday schedule and the Vespers schedule. And so I was thinking that I know for myself, I want to learn how to read correctly, how to work out parables. And we're talking about going back to some of those videos, some of those studies together to be able to, I want to make it my purpose, my mission, to know how to work things out for myself. Because if we are, I do have the question up there, how do we know God? Yes, methodology. How do we know God? How can we know God if we can't work out ourselves? Because he did state that there are those, he used the verse, I think it's in Hebrews, that they don't need to be taught because they know God. And how do we know God? How do we come to know God? As Ava said, through the methodology. And that would help us to, I think, as we go through this, to rightly understand what it means that the prophet being subject, is that how you say the word, to their own, we're all subject to our own humanity. Troy says, I think he really wanted us to not just believe what leaders say without close examination. I think he was fearful when everyone put their hands up that they would not question Elder Tess's teachings, because then how could we be corrected if need be? And I think it's to me, maybe you can all resonate the same way that I do. Kind of sounds really scary to say that Elder Tess is wrong about something, right? But I think he wants us to examine our own selves and know how to work things out ourselves, because like I said, Edson, right? Hiram Edson is the one that was going to open up this message. And who's he going to open up and give it to? Does God work with just one person? Definitely there's a distinction. But we're not prophets. Definitely there's a distinction. And that, how do we see the distinction? How do we understand the distinction and yet still reconcile that somebody else worked out, not given, but worked out an important part of the message that would have given them the time? Does that make sense?
Elaine?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to share, you know, when you look at this whole thing about, you know, being in balance, being on the road, not being in the left ditch or the right ditch, and we're discussing the, you know, how we evaluate, you know, every word that a prophet says, and one extreme is, do you hang on every single word, which Elder Parmenter is telling us is wrong. We're not supposed to do that. And the other side of it, the other ditch, is you just decide, oh, that they're wrong, so I'm just going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just ditch the whole prophet and go off on my own. And the reality of it is we do have to collectively review and go over the words of the prophet, and then be able to discern, you know, where God is really leading, even though he's using weak, frail humanity, you know, with the prophets and with the leaders and with each one of us collectively in this group for us to work together. So I think this is a really good review we're doing here.
And reminiscing back and going back to your initial question, you were talking about the shaking at the beginning of this presentation. If I remember right, we as a group came through the shaking on the other side as a group. We were small back then, but we looked to each other and confided in each other. And I think that helped us to bind us together. So when we came out of the other side, we looked at what was being said and what was shaking the movement at that time. And I think we come to a consensus between us. And I think that binds us together when we look at all the facts and talk about it, and when we feel that it's righteous in our hearts, we come out the other end and state our position as a group and which direction we're going to go. Because it's a scary thing when you see the when you see the movement just start to rip. When it starts to rip, it just, I don't know, to me it was like, it was kind of surreal to watch it all. I've never seen anything like it. And then when it took place, I had to look around and ask Christine, that was stressful, wasn't it? Was that stressful for you? Because it was stressful to me. And we had to confide in each other. And it's devastating because you have people on the other side that you have love for, you know, that was a part of a bigger group at one time. But you also have to look at where God is. And if God's not in that message, then it's not a good message. We have to follow God and go past what we feel in our hearts even though it hurts, but God will bind us up and heal us and remove the pain eventually. And we still hope and pray for those other folks, but you have to go where God leads. You have to go there. There's no other choice.